I'm Robin Crane, and this is the Growing Your Financial Business the Woman's Way podcast. Listen, I was a financial advisor for over a decade, and I got so sick of the old archaic strategies that your grandpa used to get clients. What the industry teaches today is still so outdated and just doesn't work anymore. So I had to find a better way for myself, and then I got obsessed with sharing these how-tos with other women like me. The stuff I teach doesn't require giving up your life, your sanity, or your family time. I want women like you to have it easier than I had it, so you can thrive in the industry. I've now helped thousands of women grow their financial businesses to multiple six figures, some even seven figures per year. So on this podcast, you're going to get an inside look at how they did it so you can do it too. Let's dive into the show.
Welcome back. I am here with Lisa J. Smith. Gotta have the J in there, right?
Absolutely, 100% the J.
We need that J. But Lisa J. Smith, she considers herself a COVIDpreneur because she started her business in June of 2020, which I think is really interesting because it hasn't been that long. And obviously, she's having a lot of success going on podcasts and all the things that she's doing. And she's the CEO and founder of Smith Company. And she's been a professional for decades and decades, but then went out to start her own business. So pretty cool. And we want to talk a little about entrepreneurship and gosh, we're going to go many different directions. So we'll just see where it goes. But I'm kind of curious about how you think like a Fortune 500 company. So tell us a little about like your experience with that and what that means. And we'll just go from there.
Absolutely. Well, I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I love to talk about all of this stuff, all things sales. What I think is fascinating about Fortune 500 companies is that they really do what the rest of us do. They just do it at a much larger scale, right? So I think at the end of the day, if you can combine what you do on a daily basis, right, and what you and your listeners are doing is really in that financial services space, understanding that you're helping build wealth for individuals and organizations. I mean, at the end of the day, Fortune 500 companies are doing not very many things, but they're doing them really well and at scale. And we can kind of dive into some of those ideas.
So, and how did you study these kind of companies? Did you work with these companies? Like, how are you so well versed? Because I know nothing about Fortune 500 companies except that they're on that list of the Fortune 500. Well, that's a good question. I don't really remember exactly what that means. I just know that's pretty baller stuff.
It is. So I did work. So I've had my talk a little bit about my career journey and answering that question. So the first 15 years of my career was really spent doing interior architecture for a whole variety of different industries. Many of them were Fortune 500 companies, whether it was in the healthcare space or the corporate office space. And then I got my MBA and went into sales and advertising. So then I was working on another different end, working with maybe Fortune 100s, right, as opposed to 500s. And there are themes. I just found throughout my career, there are themes that these—
Not just with like the wall color?
Right. No, not just with the wall color. Absolutely not.
That's all I got for interior design. That's all I got.
No, there are themes that they all use. Like they're very strategic, right? They have to be because they're big. But I think some of us don't spend enough time thinking about how strategy impacts our daily life, even if you're running your own organization like I am. And I think they're really good at process. They have to be, again, because they've scaled. They have hundreds of people that they're working with. Like, for example, I worked with Target. So for quite a long time, you have to have processes and procedures if you're going to have 10,000 employees, right? And they know how to leverage technology. They're really good at leveraging automation and technology, not because they have the budget to do that. They do that because it helps them achieve their end goal. Interestingly enough, in the latter half of my, advertising, sales, marketing career before I started Smith Co., they really understand the good ones, the right ones who are partnered with the right individuals. They know how to tell stories. They know how to use stories to leverage their messaging. And these are all things I feel like we can and experiment with some of those stories and content. We can adopt those ideas and take them into our daily use for what we do every day.
Okay, so let's break some of this stuff down because, and like show these ladies or the token men that might be listening here, how can they use this? How can they do this themselves? Because you said, if I can remember, you said I was going to write it down, but I was late to the page here. Processes, you said I think I do remember technology, and then you said storytelling for their messaging, right?
Yep, and strategy. Strategy, process, technology, storytelling. And then a little experimentation. Absolutely.
And experimentation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that now we just created a 5-step system, or you did, and you already had it, but it seems like 5 steps. Okay. So let's start with strategy then. So you're saying strategy is number one. So what did you find that the Fortune 500 companies are doing specifically when it comes to strategy that might be different than a solopreneur or someone who owns their own firm, but only has, maybe a couple support staff or employees?
Sure. Here's the key that I have found throughout all of my experience as a professional consultant. Strategy is about saying no. Strategy is about being so laser focused on who your core is, or either what your core services are or your core target, that even though it feels scary because it means you think that you're going to alienate hundreds of thousands of potentials of opportunities, you're not. It's the reverse. By saying no, by really understanding that I'm going to swim in this lane, I'm going to talk to these people. You talk about that in your 5-step process, right? I'm going to look at these ideal targets. And when I define them, I know how to find them, look at them, talk to them. That's strategy. It's about being super laser focused. And I think that, every tendency, especially as a solopreneur or someone who's just starting out or just starting to manage a portfolio, right, or building their business, I think the key is like, if I do that, if I don't spend time talking to every opportunity, I'm not going to be successful. And it's really scary. But you have to be laser focused at what you want. And it actually is much more efficient. You know this. This is part of your, I was preaching to the choir here, Robin.
Yeah, well, I love it because I totally agree with you, and it's easier, so we don't have to argue here and fight. So how did you do this? Like, so when you started your business in 2020, and can you think of a time where you had to say no when you thought, man, I want to say yes to everything? Because you're absolutely right. I mean, this happens a lot. I have a money type I call delusional Dan, and there are a lot of women who come to me who are in this kind of money type as delusional Dan, and they want to do everything. They want to say yes to everything. And so the biggest advice I give them is focus. And I love that they're delusional Dans. I have my second money type is delusional Dan. So I think very big. I think anything is possible. I need that compelling future, that big drive to like want to grow and want to have humongous goals and to reach them and have this big vision. But if you're not focused, then there's no way you can get there. And a lot of the women that I work with, when they first come to me, it's like there's so many opportunities. They can't say no, just like you said, like they want to say yes to everything. Right. But I find it like it is difficult sometimes, like because you want to say yes. So did that happen to you at all in your career where you were just like, I said no, and then it actually worked out?
Yeah, many times, although in different, computations, different ways. So what was fascinating to me when I started my own business, having especially in advertising, we always talked about pick a core target market and go for that, right? When I started my own business, what ended up happening was I didn't really know who I was targeting because I was really like, I'm going to hang a shingle. I know I can do this as an entrepreneur, but I have no idea what people will buy. And it's COVID. So all the rules are changed, right? So now what do I do? So I was really testing a bunch of things. And I had worked with a company because I had worked in a lot of healthcare. I had worked with a company probably for almost 5 years to get an opportunity to work with them. And they finally came to me. And by the time they came to me, I had pivoted and realized I didn't want to be in that space. And so after working
as a consultant for a corporation, you're saying?
Yeah, well, for a small consulting company that then consulted to the bigs in healthcare.
So let me make sure I got that right. Sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure I understand. So you're saying you had this desire to work with this company, and then you decided to start your own company. And then it got to a point where finally they wanted you, and you're like, sorry, bitches, peace out.
I said no. I said, I absolutely can't help you with any of that. I've gone in another direction. I can give you a referral. So sorry. And I hung up the phone and I literally had a panic attack. I was like, what did I just do? But I knew that I had pivoted my services away from what they wanted, because it wasn't specific to sales, which is what I do. I live and breathe sales every day, all day long. And and I think they were shocked because I had done all this work, grooming them, prepping them, priming them, right? And then I'm like, nope, this is not the time. And then I pivoted my core target. I didn't have a core target market. So I really believe I have to follow the advice I give all my clients. I need to walk in their shoes. If I don't, I'm being inauthentic. So then I hired a coach and we found out inadvertently, little did I know, my core target market are women. They're female leaders, they're female entrepreneurs, they look like me, they're BIPOC leaders, they look like me not because I am a woman, that's not why no, because we're better aligned. There are so many things that I can do to help women be successful, grow their success and wealth. And so it just made sense. And so, yeah, it was scary. It was so terrifying. I literally had a panic attack and I'm like, you have to believe in the core of your being if you're doing the right thing, that you've got to follow the path. And it absolutely worked out, right? But you have to have faith, trust. You talk about all of this, Robin.
Sounds like you listen to my podcast, girl.
I do.
I'm like, this is awesome. I'm like, I'm so appreciative of that. I'm like, I think a lot of people come on and they're like, who the hell are you? They never say that. No. But that's very nice. That's very nice. Yeah. But I think we're in a lot of alignment, and obviously, I've been working with women for the last 7 years, but it's interesting you bring that up because, recently I had this little identity crisis because, and I mentioned this maybe on some podcasts, but back in February, I went to one of my mastermind events that I'm in. It's called Flight Club. Not Fight Club, but Flight Club. And it's a great, phenomenal group. And for years, people have been telling me, like, why don't you work with men? Because they say, what do you do? And I'm like, I help female financial professionals grow their businesses. And I've coaching programs and whatnot. They're like, why don't you work with men? And I'm like, because I don't want to. And because I'm really good at helping women. Yeah. And then the truth is, like, we've been marketing so much on Facebook that it got to a point like the end of last year and the beginning of this quarter where it's like, it wasn't working. And everybody says Facebook has gotten more difficult. And people say that Facebook was like so easy, like 4 or 5 years ago, when people just like put an ad up and they'd like get a 10, it's called ROAS, like return on your ad spend, and I never got that great of results, but we always had a profit. And so then it got, recently got harder and harder to like find my people on Facebook. And so I was at this conference and had this conversation, and I was talking to actually many, many women too. And one of my really good friends, Julia, I should bring her on this podcast. She's amazing. But she was like, why do you have to target the gender? Like, how about just the attribute?
This has come up in my business. Yes.
And so it was the first time, though, believe it or not, that I was like, okay, like I could maybe work with this because, at a certain stage, especially when you're trying to scale, like, well, if you say you work with women, that's way bigger audience, even women entrepreneurs than female financial professionals. Right. And so I was like, well, still saying financial professionals is still a very tight niche. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to be working with old boys club guys. I don't want to be working with the ones that, are talking down to people that my women would feel small near, but they're like a lot of really cool dudes in this industry. And so for the first time, and I think there's also like, this whole gender thing is also getting very blurred as well. And I never want anyone to feel like, I'm sorry, you're not a woman. I did have one guy come up to me, he listened, or not come up to me like in person, but virtually. He sent me an email and he said, I listened to your podcast. I'm not a woman, but I'm gay. Is that close enough? And so I was like, I'm not going to say no to you, and I didn't mean to ostracize because of your gender. It's just that's who I've been helping. So I had this conversation for years. My husband's been saying this for years, whatever. And this is the first time I finally was like open to it. And we haven't really started a ton of targeting to men, but I just did a keynote on Wednesday to men and women. And we had 20 people join the program that I offered. It's like a session and some other things, but 11 of the 20 were men. And I was like, okay, here it comes, baby. Cause it's like, I'm still targeted. I'm not veering, but like for a long time I had my flag planted, women only. And so I think I definitely am not saying I don't agree with you. I'm saying I agree with you. Yeah. It's just, there's an umbrella, right? So there is
an umbrella. There is.
I could have gone women, and then I could have different like verticals of women attorneys, women professionals, women, whatever. I chose, I'm going to like start opening up because I'm doing a lot of keynotes now and open it up to, doesn't matter the gender, but it's really the industry, right?
Yeah. And the process and the thinking. So this is fascinating. I love this. Here is the thing for me. I totally relate to that. Initially, when I launched, I didn't want to embrace the fact that I was a female entrepreneur. I felt like it shouldn't matter. People are going to know who I am when they meet me. That doesn't matter. But when it comes to money, Robin, this is my insight. This was my personal aha moment. I ran my business so differently than a man would run his, because it does come down to gender. Gender, unfortunately, societally, and money, and the idea of how you manage money, make money, your philosophies about money, the decisions that you do, how risky are you with your money? We have some built-in things societally, and I can't speak globally, I want to speak to the United States, that I think impact us when we are then going out and leading and driving sales that are different than men. It's not bad, good, or indifferent. It's just different. And I think there's an incredible woman that I love talking to. Her name is Karen Holland, and she's out of Canada. And she was an economist for years, and now she runs a nonprofit called Gifting Sense. And she and I were talking about this, and I asked her, I said, I really feel like, women have a different attitude toward money. And she said, like you, I would challenge you about the gender. Maybe it's not really about women. Maybe it's about how we have been taught to think about money, right? It's other things. But I think for me in my business, my purpose is to see other women entrepreneurs be successful. I want to raise the female BIPOC vote. So if I want to do that, I have to target them. And I think you may have started, now maybe you're growing, right? Within your messaging and you're changing. I think you want to see more female financial leaders, right? Absolutely. So when you want to see more of them, you have to target them in order to create them.
Well, even at this keynote, I was actually talking to the audience and I said, our whole mission has been to increase the footprint of women in the industry. And I actually think that we need men on board with that. And if 80%, somewhere between, 80%, maybe even, it depends on the stats. Sometimes I guess it's 75% men are in the industry. They want more women, maybe as partners, advisors, to work with. And then we all know that the transfer of wealth is going to women, and women are underserved. Like the reason I want more women in the industry is because I think women, just like you're saying, when it comes to wealth, when it comes to their money, like they're underserved. And we are in a patriarch society. We are in a way that we were taught to not be as savvy with our money. And there's all these things, women are underserved. And so my philosophy, the only reason I could get behind it, because I don't want just to help the old white dudes just be more successful without bringing women along. But I have a lot of women who tell me stories about one of their mentors, and he, helped her to be more successful and all this. Sure. So I'm thinking where I'm at right now, and we'll see, this is also part of the test, is that if I can, the women, how can we serve more women when it comes to wealth? Well, we need the men in the industry to stop talking down to the women. We need the men to actually look at the women, not just talk to the man of the house, when the woman might be the breadwinner or not, And so I think the whole industry actually has to change. And so it's morphing for me, and I don't even know where it's going, but I know to back up what you're saying, and I want to make sure this is really clear, because now I got into the philosophy of what I believe in my company and my mission, but it all morphs into something, evolves into something. But what I would say is what I teach to, and as you probably know, is this idea of cloning, this idea of who's the person that you want to attract. Yep. And I like to make it really simple. It's and again, I just did this in the keynote. We talk about this thing I call the rule of 10. And the idea is that you're on this quest, just get 10 clients. It's really one client 10 times. And who's that one person? And on the path, I still might say my clone is a woman who, she's making $100,000 to $300,000 a year. She wants to get to $500,000, then $1 million a year. And she's in the financial industry and all this. But on the path to that, I can go do keynotes and work with men. I don't have to say, no, I can't work with you. But my message talks to that woman. My brand talks to that woman. It doesn't mean you always have to say woman or women, but the fact is that I'm clear about who I want to attract, and the messaging has to stand behind that. And the big takeaway, Lisa, I think, that you're saying, I want to make sure I'm not confusing the audience with the shifts that I'm making, is that it doesn't have to be by gender. It could be by a different, umbrella. By industry. It could be that you help serve attorneys. Doesn't matter what their gender is. It could be that you help, nurses. Does that mean you're not going to work with any men because there are men nurses? So it doesn't have to be gender, but it does have to be specific. Otherwise, you're talking to nobody when you're trying to talk to everybody.
Yes, 100%. And the irony is, by doing that, by focusing in on some key core value trait, characteristic, in order to talk to those individuals. And if you're selling something, even if it's financial services, right, that has a tangible, you're trying to alleviate some kind of pain. Okay. You're trying to create more gains and alleviate pain. And so by doing that, if you can talk to those individuals, that doesn't mean you're not going to be talking to other people who also share in that. They just, to your point, they may not qualify in whatever characteristic that you're, whether it is an industry, whether it is a gender, whether it is a type of service, B2B versus B2C. So I totally 100% agree. That's strategy. And then you end up attracting more because you're very specific about the messaging that you're using.
But the attracting more, like you just said, is because you actually start becoming, you're seen and perceived as the expert when you start working with a specific person.
Yes.
It happens so often. People are so afraid to pigeonhole themselves and, oh gosh, you said at the beginning, like people don't want to do this because they're afraid that they're going to, they want to work with everybody. They want to have that option. But what happens is they say everybody, and then everybody else thinks that they're not credible because of it. So
yes,
that's part of the strategy. Okay. So you said strategy, there's a lot to unpack here, but we probably that's our most in-depth part. You said processes or processes. So what is like the number one thing that you saw as far as like creating process or following a process that is a big takeaway from the Fortune 500 companies?
Okay, so here's the deal. And it sounds so unbelievably simple. And I'm sure this happens to you every day when you talk to people and you're building your content. You have to write it down. You just have to codify something. You have to say, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to write it down, and I'm going to write the steps down, and I'm going to follow those steps and be consistent. And then when it doesn't work, I'm going to change it. We run so fast. We feel like we have to change and pivot and adapt so fast that we do not take the time, again, myself included, to codify, like put the process in place. And then because Fortune 500 have scale, they have to write it down. They have to tell tens of thousands of people how they're going to do something or what their expectations are. But then they follow, so this goes hand in hand, process and then tools and automation. Then they follow that up and pair tools that support their process that make them more efficient. You cannot figure out what you have to use, what platforms you need, what software, what apps, what AI, what Intel, until you know what process you want, right? So you're defining both the inputs and the outputs at the same time. But we spend so little time writing it down or documenting it in some way. It could be a napkin, a cocktail napkin on a piece of it. It doesn't matter how you start. You have to start someplace by writing down and defining it, and then you can expand and add on to it.
That's awesome. I was just thinking about one of my clients, Leah, and I remember she came on a coaching call and she was like, so I need help with this. And she basically said, like, I don't have time because she's working with this other like senior advisor and he wanted to have her on these calls. And what she was doing on these calls is like, she was just being on these calls like for an hour and a half with the client to essentially document what he was saying and doing so that at the end that she could tell them what to do. Like, here's like the summary basically, like in an email, and the 1, 2, 3 as far as what to do next.
Right.
I was like, oh my God, girl, like, okay, just record it. Record the call. And they're doing these on Zoom now, right? So I'm like, record the Zoom, get it up on Otter, some transcription service.
Right.
Then you can review. I wouldn't even have you review it. I'd have someone else review it.
Right.
Have them at the end do 5 minutes of a summary. So like he records it for an hour and a half, and then he stops the recording and starts a new recording and says, here's what we talked about. And he'll go boom, 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 boom. I should really do this for podcasts for my gal. So I'm all talk and I don't always do it, but it's like, here's what we talked about, right? Yeah. And here are the 3 things they need to do. Right. And in 5 minutes now, she can have that on Otter, and then she sends them an email and it's right there. And if she wants to review the recording, she can, but it's like, and she's like, oh my God. And then she's like, and then I can get someone else to do it. I'm like, yes, like, you don't have, like, why would you be doing that anyway? Get an admin to do that.
Exactly. And so what does that translate to? For me, how I interpreted that, amazing, by the way, what that translates to for me is now you spend the time on the things that really bring you money.
Yeah.
Now you spend the time on driving content or doing things that are of value, as opposed to doing things that are not driving value. Do you have to do that? Sure. That's part of the deliverable and relationship building, right? And so they can use tools to supplement all that. But if you don't think of and sometimes I think we get so caught up in the tasks. It's the whole, are you working in your business or on your business, right? That we get so caught up in the tasks that we value our time in the task and taking it off of the to-do list. And when I became a solopreneur, I'm like, I can't spend my time on any of that stuff. That's not driving any of my revenue. So I think that's genius, Robin. I love that. I love that example.
Well, also it's like everyone says they don't have time. Like no one has time. And I think, I don't know who said it, but maybe it's Tony Robbins. I listen to him sometimes, but it's like, we all have the same amount of time. Like the only thing that is equal on this planet, the only thing is the amount of time we all have. Yes. I'm like, wow, that's pretty crazy. Like that is it. It's like not our upbringing is not equal. Our bodies aren't equal. Our looks aren't equal. Like nothing else is equal except the amount of time that we have. Mm-hmm. And so I like to think of it as an exchange of time. So it's like, typically the technical term that I use is you're doing stupid shit. Like stop doing the stupid shit and instead exchange that time for doing, some smart shit. And what you just said is like things that are making money. I call those money making activities. Like I like to exchange like the word marketing or prospecting for money making activities because there's so much stuff that you're doing that's like not making you money and that's taking so much time. And then we got to take a look and actually evaluate that and say, okay, these things I'm doing and how much is actually like making me money. I have something called the 7-step marketing plan. If I can think of the URL, I'll give it to you guys in a second, or we'll put in the show notes. But the 7-step marketing plan, the whole purpose of this is to go through and see what are you currently doing when it comes to your marketing, what's actually getting you the clients. So you take a look at like, who are the last clients you got, like especially the A clients that you got in the last 12 months, where did they come from? Yep. How do you get them? Networking. Okay, I guess you can do networking from 1985. Well, maybe you don't want to wait that long. So it's like we really notice like where did they come from? And then it's like now I'm going to put my attention and time and effort and energy on doing those marketing activities to really money making activities. And then you realize you've been spending all this time marketing, quote unquote, but that didn't get you any new clients, or the clients you got sucked balls. And so instead you're like, okay, these are the ones I got to do. So it's just really evaluating what you're doing so that you spend time on the right things and then exchange the time and then do the right things.
100%.
We're good 100%. Together, Lisa.
We are great together. I love it. Awesome. Here's the other thing about documenting the process. When you start documenting in that example, Robin, what I love about that is now you have data, which you can leverage to create insights, which then you put to work for your business. This is working. This isn't working. Stop doing that, right? Start doing this. But again, we don't spend enough time thinking about it. We're surrounded by data. So in a way, we're too inundated with it, but we're not even tracking the stuff that is going to be most impactful to our day-to-day lives. And here's the con of Fortune 500. They have all these bloated, layers of bureaucracy and policies and procedures and way things do. And so if you've been in corporate America, like I have, and you inherit that stuff, or you're in corporate America now and you're trying to be successful despite all of that, you have to shove off all the bureaucracy and all those bad habits and say, focus, to your point, on the things that are going to make you money, and track the things that then you can say, I'm just going to start doing that and stop doing that because it's not making me money. So they kind of go hand in hand, process and data measurement.
I never was in corporate, so I don't get it. But
good for you. Good for you.
I know it's crazy because I can't even imagine my personality as someone. When I was a kid, 16, I actually even before that, but I decided to be a lifeguard because I was working at this Jewish camp and I got paid $250 for the whole summer. And I was like, this sucks. Maybe it wasn't the whole summer, but it was 3 or 4 weeks or something like that. And even at the time when I was 16 years old, I thought that I should get paid more than that.
Yeah, a little undervalued there.
Yeah, a little undervalued. Right. And so then I heard that the lifeguard who was there, who was also teaching swimming lessons, got $750 for the summer. I was like, okay, hook it up. So the next year, I got my certification or whatever to teach swimming. And then it was half the summer that I did that. So I made my $750 in the first 3 to 4 weeks. And then I went and I looked for a job. And the first I went to, to a typical swim club. And they're like, okay, it's $15. It was something like $15, maybe $20 an hour. I don't know. It was more than the norm, but at 16 years old, it might've been more that I could have gotten $8 to $10 an hour, but instead it was maybe a little bit more than that. But I was like, but I know they're charging $25 a lesson. So that doesn't make any sense. And so again, my entrepreneurial spirit, I'm like, screw that. I want to make the money. So I started going to people's homes and I would drive there. And my very first, I would do $8 for a lesson, but it was for a half an hour lesson. So there I am making $16 an hour. So whatever the numbers were. And then it was later I started to charge $25 a half an hour. So I was by 17, 18 years old, I was making $50 an hour. And then I got really smart. My parents had a pool. So then I had them come to me and I was
yeah.
And I was my mom was a pre-kindergarten teacher. And so she was my pimp. I mean, she was my marketer.
Oh my God, lead gen all day long.
So it was like total lead gen. Yeah. So my mom was like just telling people, oh, my daughter teaches swimming lessons. They'd all come to me. I mean, it was like 8 a.m. till 5 o'clock and I was making $50 an hour. Like I'd make $10,000 in the summer at like 17, 18 years old. And I was rolling and I ended up traveling around the world. So like, it was freaking awesome. Why did I bring that up? I forget. But
because you were trying to talk about not having to be in corporate.
Oh yeah, not being in corporate. So yes, thank you. You will be my conscious mind. So basically, I was like, damn, like I can't even imagine going to corporate where they're going to just. They feel like they're just going to make money off of me. Like I'd rather make money off myself. So I had that intuition anyway, good or bad, because I was broke for a while, but eventually.
Hey, entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs.
Entrepreneurs, you have to start at the bottom, baby. Nobody starts at the top.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I know we only have a little bit more time, but I want to, because you made it such a system, everybody's going to be wondering what the heck, like they need the end of it. But you said story and messaging, and I always talk about messaging as like not even taught in the industry because it's like they don't know that word. But give a little on that, and then step 5, you said experiment, right?
Yeah. So so here's an example of something that I'm learning at myself. I think when people are really good at what they do, they forget what's like when they didn't know about what they do that are really good, right? So I spend so much time in the theory and the practice of sales and all of the pricing and the strategy and all of these things. Sometimes with my clients, I got some really great feedback with a young entrepreneur recently that has a SaaS product. He's like, Lisa, the theory is great, but you need to give me stuff that I understand that I can do. And I'm like, whoa, you blew my mind, right? So I gave a talk recently to a membership community in advertising, and I used an analogy. I'm like, this should be, so I was like, this is a novel idea. Let me use an analogy. So I started using analogies and stories to illustrate my ideas. And for me, I felt like I was taking a step back. But in essence, I'm not. I'm bringing everyone along with me, right? Because I might be further along because I'm spending all this time in this one specific space. So I think stories are about emotion. We all know this. Stories are about characters and archetypes, the hero and the rebel, right? And they're all of these things. And so when we start to think about messaging, even though with financing can feel dry, right? But we're talking with humans who need stories in order for us to relate to each other. And so when I think the great Fortune 500, like I think everyone's going to know this, when you use emotion and storytelling. When Johnson & Johnson started doing advertising about the moms of the Olympic athletes, I'm going to start crying like right now. Like that got me, right? They're telling a story about, I'm getting verklempt, about what it means, the sacrifice. I think when we think less about the data and less about coming off as trying to be the expert and more about trying to relate to our clients as humans and tell stories to explain things, and then trial and error. Did that work or this work? Let me post this on social. Let me try TikTok. Let me try YouTube. Don't be afraid just because some of the technology, I know TikTok's owned by China. We're having some issues right now. Don't be afraid to experiment. I think sometimes we're like, set it, forget it. I figured it out. I spent a lot of money on this. This is what my agency wants me to do. No, it's all trial and error. That's how we know it's working and not working. So I think they're willing to, and they can, again, because of scale, test stories, understand what stories are going to resonate because they have that core market, right? They were laser like a focus and that strategy. And then you find out what's working and what's not working. And then, like you're still too theory, Lisa. You're still too far up top. You need to bring it, back down and you need to come all the way to the bottom. So that's what I mean by that. And I think that then you can have fun. Some of this stuff is actually fun.
Absolutely. We should write a book called Stories Sell, Numbers Are Hell.
Yeah, done. You and I, let's go.
Because I was trying to remember, there was some saying about like stories sell and then something else, and I couldn't remember. So I just decided to make that part up. But I do think it's true. Like especially women are very nurturing and loving and really care about their clients. And not that men don't, but it's just like we're naturally like that. It's
a different approach. Yeah.
That's what we're drawn to, is like really serving people and transforming their lives. And then they get into the numbers and shit and like all the things that are like in their heads, and they stop connecting. And then the connection fades. And even with this keynote, like, I've been talking about this now because I was like in keynote hell for like 2 weeks of like just every ounce of energy I had was towards this keynote. What was like the parts that I spent, endless hours on, endless hours were the stories.
Yeah.
Tightening up my stories. Like that's, and the analogies, connecting, I was like going back and forth about my original story that I was going to tell at the beginning. And that set the stage. And I did it probably 5 times with different stories, not all different, but like 5 times testing these stories. And I'm like, no, that's not it. That's not it. And finally I found the right story. It was a very emotional story. And then like that got me, like that totally set the right stage for the keynote, and it builds trust, and it allows people to connect and see that you're not perfect. And and then the jokes were tough too, but the jokes are important too. But I mean, that's a little bit of entertainment, but I do think it's humanizing everything. And I think when you start to be the robot that, like, nobody wants a robot advisor. That's something, okay. Some people want the robot advisor. It's called a robo advisor because they don't want it, because they're cheap as shit and they don't want to pay you, but you don't want those people. So don't be a robo, don't be a robot.
That's right.
We'll end with that. Tell them where to find you, and, write that down. Don't be a robot.
Don't be a robo. Absolutely. So
that'll be in my next presentation.
If you want to chat with me, you can find me at Smith Co. US. Oh my goodness. SmithCoUS.com. That's my website. You can Smith Co Sales. You can follow me on Insta, find me on LinkedIn, Smith Co Sales. That's
Smith Co Sales. And I said company earlier, so I'm glad you corrected that. Awesome. Well, you've been amazing. And thank you all for listening. We will see you next time. Oh, actually, before you go, I want to just remind you, because we have obviously a slew of episodes. And if you're just coming on, or maybe you've only heard a few, I'll point your attention to a really good one. Episode 115, The Power of Speaking to Build Authority with Cheryl Wood. I was thinking about her just because we were talking about the keynote, and she's one of my friends who I met at Lisa Nichols' event, and she's a phenomenal keynoter, and just so powerful, and such a wonderful, like, huge heart, wonderful woman. And so check that out if you haven't seen that. That came out on March 29th. So go back and get into the podcast so that you can get more out of this, and we can continue to give you amazing free content and help you change your life and change your business. Thanks again. We'll see you next time on Growing Your Financial Business the Woman's Way. Bye-bye now.